The Alpha King ordered Maelis Thorn to scrape the living silver from the East Moon wall while the entire court watched. They called it cleaning. That was how nobles made cruelty sound useful. Maelis knelt on the frost-black stones beneath the old border wall, with a bone scraper in her hand, her knees soaked through her patched skirt, her fingers already split from the cold. Above her, the East Moon wall rose higher than any keep in the kingdom, built from ancient black stone and stitched with pale silver trails that shimmered faintly wherever the moon touched them. The Moonseal creatures clung to those trails in clusters no larger than curled leaves, their bodies translucent, their shells like wet pearl, their undersides glowing with cold light as they fed on the darkness pressing from the other side. They had guarded the border longer than any lord alive. Maelis knew that, because she had tended them since girlhood. The court knew only that they looked unpleasant against black stone, and worse beside foreign inspection banners. "Higher, border architect," Maelis Thorn called from the inspection platform. The upper seam still crawls. Laughter moved through the gathered nobles. Maelis did not look up. She pressed the bone scraper carefully beneath a cluster of moonseals and eased them away from the stone without cutting their soft undersides. They trembled against her palm, leaving thin silver threads across her skin. Not slime, not filth, seal trail, living moon silver. A border language, older than crown banners. A noblewoman covered her nose with a scented cloth. How has she endured the smell for years? "They say wall scrapers stop smelling human after a while," another replied. Maelis placed the loosened creatures gently into a clay bowl lined with damp moon moss. Her hand shook once. Only once. The Moonseal creatures curled toward her warmth, their small bodies pulsing faintly. They had never smelled foul to her. They smelled of rain on stone, winter moss, and old night held at a distance. But the court wanted the wall bare for tomorrow's inspection by the Western envoys, and pale, crawling things did not suit royal display. So Maelis had been brought out as proof of improvement, the low woman cleaning what the pack had been too negligent to remove. Alpha King Corvan Blackmere stood at the center of the platform, dark and motionless beneath a mantle of black wolf fur. He was tall enough that even armored men seemed to arrange themselves around him. His hair was the deep brown-black of wet bark, his eyes a hard silver gray, and the old scar crossing his jaw made his stillness more dangerous than another king's anger. Behind him hung the East Pack banners, moon-white wolves painted over storm-blue cloth. Corvan had read Neville's wall report that morning. Primitive growth, visual contamination, structural inefficiency. He had trusted the clean words because tomorrow's envoys would see the wall before they ever saw the dead villages behind it. Everyone looked at him carefully. Maelis tried not to. It was difficult. Not because she hoped for kindness. Hope had been scraped from her long before the wall. But Corvan had come to the East Moon Wall only twice in her life, and each time the Moonseals had stilled, as if recognizing something in his blood. Today, they trembled instead. The king's wolf was sick. No one had told her. No one needed to. The wall told her through its cold. Neville stepped forward, elegant in a slate-gray architect's coat lined with silver thread. She was thin, precise, and beloved by the court because she made border danger look like geometry. Maps obeyed her. Stones obeyed her. Men with titles admired anyone who could turn terror into clean lines. "Majesty," Neville said, "as you can see, years of primitive wall-keeping have left the eastern face polluted with old growth. Once cleaned and resealed under architectural supervision, the border will look worthy of your reign." Maelis heard the word polluted and felt one moonseal press deeper into her palm. Corvan's gaze moved from the wall to her. For one breath, the laughter seemed farther away. "What is your name?" he asked. A foolish warmth moved through her before she could stop it. "Maelis Thorn, Majesty." "Your duty?" She swallowed. "Wallkeeper." Neville smiled gently. "Scraper, Majesty. The old title is generous." Maelis looked down at the bowl. The creatures inside had stopped glowing. Corvan's eyes narrowed slightly at that, but he said nothing. That silence cut more deeply than Nivelle's correction, because he had noticed, and still allowed it. "Continue," Corvan said. The warmth died. Maelis bowed her head and returned to the wall. Her scraper found another seam. Pale creatures clung there in a dense crescent, their silver trails braided into a pattern almost like writing, a warning pattern, not old growth, not pollution. The moonseals had made that crescent only when night pressure gathered beyond the stones. She leaned closer. The silver trails were trembling. "Majesty," she said. The court quieted, amused by the interruption. Nivelle's face sharpened. The scraper was not asked to advise. Maelis kept her palm against the wall. The stone beneath the creatures pulsed once. Weak and wrong. "The outer dark is pressing early." A few nobles laughed outright. "Outer dark," one murmured. "How charming." Nivelle sighed as if embarrassed on Maelis's behalf. Untrained laborers often mistake creature movement for border signs. "Majesty, this is precisely why the wall must be taken from superstition and placed under measured design." Corvan descended one step from the platform. The moonseals in Maelis's bowl turned toward him, not toward the wall, toward him, then away. A small crease formed between his brows. Maelis saw his hand flex at his side, where a king might hide pain if his wolf had just stirred beneath weak skin. "Explain," he said to her. "Nivelle moves fast." "Majesty?" I asked her. Maelis looked up. His voice had not softened. But for the first time, it had made room. "The creatures are not dirt," she said. "Their trails seal what the stones cannot." Moonseals were not pets. They were living mortar. Where they fed, darkness could not find a seam. Where they were scraped away, the wall became only stone. If you strip the upper seam before moonrise, the wall will look cleaner and die faster. The court went silent. Nivelle's expression cooled. "That is a dangerous accusation. It is a border fact. A woman who sleeps in a wall shed and talks to shell. Creatures does not define border fact." Maelis felt the words land. She had slept in that shed through winters when nobles forgot the East existed. She had woken with frost in her hair and blood under her nails from repairing cracks no architect had mapped. She had fed the creatures moon moss when the old trails dimmed. She had scraped them only to move them from dead stone to living seam, never to make a wall pretty. But she had no title the court respected, only hands they called filthy. Corvan's gaze dropped to those hands. For a heartbeat, something shifted in his face. Then Nivelle raised her voice. "For the safety of the inspection and the dignity of the crown, I advise dismissal of the wall scraper until the East Moon wall is properly cleared." Maelis went still. Corvan looked at the trembling silver crescent, then at the watching court, then at the envoy's empty viewing stand waiting for tomorrow. A king choosing between truth and display. She knew before he spoke. "Remove the remaining creatures," he said. "Then dismiss her from wall duty until review." The words entered Maelis quietly. Quiet wounds lasted longest. She bowed once, because dignity was the only thing they had not yet ordered from her. "As you command." She lifted the scraper. The moment bone touched the silver crescent, every Moonseal creature on the East Moon wall released at once, not falling, crawling. Hundreds of pale bodies loosened from the black stone and turned away from the wall. Their silver trails brightened, thin and furious, as they moved across the frost toward Maelis. They did not choose her. They fled to the only living seam that had not cut them. The court recoiled. Nivelle whispered, "Impossible." The creatures climbed over Maelis's skirts, her sleeves, her scraped hands. Cold light wrapped her wrists. Silver trails crossed her chest like a living shield. Behind her, the bare section of wall split open, with a sound like night taking its first breath, and from the crack, something outside began to knock. The knock came again. Not loud. That was what made every wolf on the inspection platform go still. A loud strike would have sounded like a battering ram, a siege engine, a beast throwing itself against stone. This was softer. Careful. Patient. Something outside the east moon wall had found a place thin enough to test with one long finger. Knock. The nobles who had laughed at Maelis Thorn took one step back from the wall. The Moonseal Creatures did not return to the stone. They clung to her instead, hundreds of pale bodies trembling over her skirt, sleeves, shoulders, and scraped hands. Their silver trails crossed her like broken threads of moonlight, bright but narrow, forming a shield no wider than her breathing body. They had not sealed the wall. They had only sealed the one living seam that had not cut them. Maelis understood that before anyone else did. The east moon wall remained bare where the crescent had been scraped, and the crack behind her widened by the width of a fingernail. Border architect Maelis Thorn recovered before the court could panic. She has corrupted them. Maelis did not look at her. Nivelle pointed toward the creatures wrapped around Maelis's arms. Majesty, you see it plainly. The creatures abandoned their assigned surface and gathered around a dismissed laborer. This is not border law. This is contamination. The word struck too close to the one she had used before. Polluted. Contamination. Filth. Dressed in cleaner robes. Alpha King Corvan Blackmere came down from the inspection platform, his black wolf mantle dragging frost behind him. His face revealed nothing, but the scar along his jaw had gone pale, and Maelis felt the wall shudder when he approached. His wolf was awake now, weak, angry, and afraid enough that the moon seals along her wrists brightened. He looked past her to the split in the stone. What is knocking? Not. Are you hurt? Not. I should have listened. Good. An apology would have been too small for the hole opening behind her. Maelis kept her chin lifted. The outer dark. A noble muttered. Darkness does not knock. The crack answered with a third tap. This time, dust fell from the seam. No one laughed. Nivelle's voice sharpened. Outer dark pressure is a wall-keeper superstition. Old women's language for temperature strain, moon damp, and unmeasured settling. Maelis turned her head at last. Then stand by the crack when it opens. The architect's expression went cold. Corvan glanced at Nivelle, then back at Maelis. Explain it. Without superstition. There it was again. The king still asking for truth in the language of the people who had shamed her. Maelis looked down at her hands. The silver creatures covered the cuts across her knuckles, glowing where blood had dried. Corvan's gaze followed. He reached as if to see the wounds, not touching yet, only moving before thought could become command. Maelis drew her hands against her chest, hiding them beneath the living trails. His hand stopped. The motion had been small. The court still saw it. These were the hands you let them call filthy, she said quietly. Corvan's jaw tightened. He did not defend himself. Good. The crack knocked again. Maelis faced the wall. The east moon wall is old stone. Stone alone cannot keep out what lives between moonrise and true night. The moon seals feed along weak seams and leave silver trail behind them. The trail hardens where darkness presses. That is the seal. Nivelle cut in. A charming myth. Maelis pointed to the bare crescent. That is why the knock is there and nowhere else. The court turned. The split had formed exactly where the upper seam had been cleared. Not below. Not beside. There. Corvan's eyes narrowed. You said the upper seam would die faster. I said the wall would. Because the moon seals were removed. Because the trails were. Nivelle gave a soft, strained laugh. Majesty. All visible old growth was scheduled for removal before moonrise. The wall must be clean for envoy presentation. A foreign inspection cannot be welcomed by crawling pale matter and superstition. Maelis heard the sentence beneath the sentence. Scheduled. Before moonrise. Her stomach dropped cold. She looked at Corvan. How much of the upper seam did she clear? Nivelle answered before he could. Enough to restore visual dignity. How much? The knock came again. Harder. The silver creatures tightened around Maelis's wrists until she almost gasped. Corvan turned to the nearest wall guard. "Bring the work orders." Nivelle's mouth thinned. "Majesty, emergency attention should remain on the current instability." "The orders," Corvan said. This time, no one mistook his voice for patience. A guard ran to the architect's table and returned with a slate-bound inspection packet. Nivelle reached for it, but Corvan took it first. His eyes moved over the clean lines, the measured diagrams, the neat marks that had made ugliness sound official. Maelis watched his face change. Not enough, but enough. "What does it say?" she asked. Corvan did not answer at once. That told her. Nivelle said, "It says the wall was being improved." Maelis stepped closer, the Moonseal creatures glowing around her like a small, frightened constellation. "Read the marked seam." Corvan looked up from the report. For one breath, the Alpha King of the East looked less like a ruler and more like a man standing before a door he had ordered opened, without asking what waited outside. His voice was low. "Upper East seam. Full clearing approved before moonrise for envoy display." The crack split wider. Cold, black air breathed through it. From the other side came the scrape of something long and patient dragging across stone. The moonseals on Maelis's body flared silver-white, but none moved back to the wall. Not one, because the wall had cut them, because she had not. The inspection packet trembled once in Corvan's hand. Then the ink on the order bled upward, black against the pale page, forming a line no architect had written for the court to see. "Upper seam cleared, by architect order." The inspection packet burst into frost. Not fire. Frost. The black ink on the page stiffened beneath Corvan Blackmere's fingers, spreading thin white veins across the order until the words looked trapped. The court stared at the line the wall had forced into visibility. "Upper seam cleared by architect order." Border architect. Maelis Thorn did not deny it. That would have been foolish. Instead, she stepped beside Corvan with the precision of a woman moving stones on a map. The order was lawful. The upper seam showed visible decay. I authorized surface clearing, so the true structural damage could be assessed. Maelis Thorn almost smiled. "Almost. Surface clearing," she said, while the crack behind her breathed black cold into the frost. "Is that what you call removing the only thing feeding on the seam?" Nivelle turned to the court. "You hear it, Majesty. She still speaks of feeding and darkness, as if this wall were a sick animal." The knock came again, closer now. The sound did not strike from outside like a hand against stone. It came through the crack itself, traveling along the inner seam, searching. The Moonseal creatures tightened around Maelis's body. Their silver trails brightened over her ribs, across her scraped wrists, around the hollow of her throat. The shield held, only around her. The wall still bled night. Corvan looked at the opening. "Can they seal it?" Maelis did not look at him. "They already tried." "Can you make them return?" "No." Nivelle's eyes sharpened. "Convenient." Maelis looked down at the pale creatures curled against her torn sleeves. Their bodies trembled with exhaustion. Some had cracked shells from being scraped too sharply before she touched the seam. Not today. Older cracks. Older wounds. She went still. Corvan saw the change. "What?" Maelis lifted one creature carefully from her wrist. It curled in her palm, leaving a thread of silver across the broken skin. A tiny ridge along its shell had been sliced clean away, not by her bone scraper. Her scraper was dull by design. She held it up. This one was cut by iron. Nivelle answered at once. "Many tools are used along the wall. No wallkeeper uses iron on Moonseal. Because wallkeepers cling to superstition. Because iron burns living mortar." The creature pulsed weakly. Corvan stepped closer, and the silver trails on Maelis's body flared in warning. He stopped before the light touched him. Again his gaze dropped to her hands. Again, she closed them before he could reach. His mouth tightened. "Show me." She almost refused. Not because truth should be hidden, because she hated that he could ask now, after he had ordered the scraping in front of everyone, hated that he noticed wounds better when the wall began dying behind her. Still, the border was bigger than pride. Maelis turned toward the cracked seam. "Look below the fresh scrape." Corvan did. At first, the wall looked like old black stone, glossy with frost and moon damp. Then the last surviving trails around Maelis brightened, casting silver light across the surface. Under that light, hidden scars appeared, thin scraped lines running beneath the upper seam, down toward the lower support stones. Not fresh, not made by the bone scraper in Maelis's hand. These were older cuts, narrow and too clean, as if someone had been shaving away silver trails in secret and leaving just enough residue to fool a distant inspection. The court leaned back from the wall. Nivelle did not. "These are maintenance marks," she said. Maelis shook her head. "No. Maintenance moves creatures from dead stone to living seam. This stripped the trails and left the creatures nowhere to feed." Corvan's voice lowered. "How old?" Maelis crouched despite the moonseals clinging to her. Their trails stretched as she moved, silver threads pulling across her body like a net. She touched the nearest hidden scar with 2 fingers. Cold shot up her arm. She heard, for one heartbeat, the sound of something outside laughing without breath. 3 nights, she said. Nivelle's expression flickered. Only once, but Maelis saw it. So did Corvan. Nivelle recovered quickly. "Impossible. No wall work was conducted 3 nights ago." Maelis lifted her fingers. Silver-black dust clung to them. Then the wall cut itself with iron. The moonseals shivered. Their trails crawled down from Maelis's sleeves and spread across the frost, not toward the cracked wall, but toward the hidden scars. They did not repair them. They only traced them, outlining each old wound in cold silver. 1 line, then another, then a dozen. The East Moon wall revealed a map of quiet damage beneath its polished face. Corvan turned on the nearest guard captain, who had night access 3 nights ago. Nivelle stepped between them. "Majesty, in a border emergency, chain of access must be reviewed after the wall is stabilized." Maelis laughed softly. The wall was unstable because someone reviewed it with iron. Another knock came. This time, the crack opened wide enough for black mist to curl through. The mist touched the nearest bare stone and recoiled from Maelis's silver shield, but it did not vanish. It slid along the wall, feeling for every hidden scrape the moonseals had just outlined. The court finally understood enough to be afraid. Corvan's hand moved to the blade at his hip. Maelis said, "Steel will not cut what has no body yet." "What will?" "Seal. Trail. Then get them on the wall." She turned to him then, cold as moonlit stone. "They will not crawl back onto a blade wound because a king is frightened." His face hardened. "Good. Let command fail, where listening had been refused." Nivelle lifted her voice. "Majesty, she is withholding border protection." Maelis faced her. "No. The wall is refusing the hands that wounded it." The silver trails on the frost gathered around the oldest cuts, glowing brighter, brighter, until a hidden line appeared beneath the scraped scars. Not ink, not law script. Moonseal memory, drawn from the places where living mortar had been torn away. Old silver trails removed before royal order. Black mist learned quickly. It did not pour through the crack like smoke from a chimney. It tasted the opening first, thin tendrils sliding over the bare stone where the Moonseal creatures had been stripped away. When it touched the living silver trails wrapped around Maelis Thorn, it recoiled with a hiss so soft only the wall seemed to hear it. Then it turned aside and began searching the hidden scrapes the creatures had revealed. The East Moon wall shuddered. A noble screamed when the shadow passed beneath her boots. Alpha King Corvan Blackmere drew his sword. Maelis did not look impressed. Steel will comfort the court, she said. It will not close the seam. His eyes cut to her. What will? Living mortar. The moonseals trembled over her sleeves, their pale bodies pulsing with exhausted light. They had made a shield around her. Yes, but only because she had become the last uncut surface they trusted. Every silver line crossing her body was thin, angry, afraid. A body was not a wall, and Maelis knew how quickly a living seam could fail under night pressure. Border architect Maelis Thorn stood near the inspection table, one hand pressed to her slate-bound orders. Majesty, do not let her turn panic into authority. The creatures are behaving unnaturally because she handled them improperly. Maelis looked at the architect's clean gloves. Improper handling leaves, bruises, iron leaves, wounds. Nivelle's smile sharpened. A woman with mud on her knees should not lecture an architect on material science. Then kneel here and show me how clean knees stop the dark. Corvan stepped between the argument and the widening crack. The black mist curled around his boots and recoiled from the wolf blood heat in him, but it did not vanish. His jaw tightened as pain moved beneath his skin. His royal wolf felt the border dying. Maelis saw it in the way his hand clenched around the sword hilt, not ready to strike, but ready to hide weakness behind violence. Can the breach be held until moonrise? He asked. Maelis laughed once quietly. This is moonrise. The silver-gray sky above the wall had already darkened into full eastern night. The envoy's banners hung pale and useless along the viewing stand, their embroidered wolves stirring in a wind that came from the wrong side of the stone. Corvan looked at the bare crescent. Then hold it now. Her face went still. The command landed too close to the old hurt. Hold it. Clean it. Scrape it. Fix what titled hands ruined. Bleed quietly, while they decided whether the bleeding had been useful. She lifted her scraped hands, letting him see the cuts under the silver trails. Do not make courage sound like permission. A silence opened between them. Corvan did not apologize. Good. She would not have believed him. Instead, he lowered his sword by a fraction. What must be done? That was better. Not enough, but better. Maelis turned to the moonseals clinging to her. I can stand against the crack, long enough for them to lay a fear trail across the opening. It will not restore the wall. It may teach the dark that this seam is still watched. A courtier whispered. She means to touch it. Nivelle stepped forward. Majesty, allowing her to press contaminated creatures into the breach could ruin the entire upper section. Maelis did not take her eyes from the wall. The entire upper section is already ruined. The crack knocked from inside. This time, the sound was not a tap. It was a knuckle dragging downward. Corvan's voice lowered. If you stand there, what happens to you? The question should not have affected her. It did, only because no one had asked before. Not when frost split her nails. Not when she slept against the wall-shed door during winter watches. Not when old Moonseal Trail burned her palms because she held creatures too long to keep them from drying out. She answered plainly, if the trail holds, I live. If it does not, the outer dark finds a living seam through me. His face changed, almost imperceptibly. Nivelle saw it and moved quickly. Majesty, emotional hesitation will cost the border. Order her to perform her function. Maelis turned. Every moonseal on her body brightened. My function, she said, was mocked until it became useful. Nivelle's eyes cooled. Corvan said nothing. Maelis stepped backward until her spine met the cold black wall beside the crack. The mist lunged. The Moonseal creatures flared silver white. Trails spilled from them, not smooth and pretty like inspection ribbon, but jagged, desperate, alive. They ran from Maelis' sleeves across the bare crescent, crossing the opening in thin, luminous strands. The dark struck those strands and hissed. Maelis bit down on a cry. Pain tore through her back like hooks of ice. Corvan moved toward her. Do not, she said through her teeth. He stopped. The silver trails thickened. One by one, the creatures stretched from her body toward the stone, not crawling fully onto the wounded wall, but laying a bridge between her and the seam. It was not repair. It was refusal, a line drawn by frightened creatures who would rather burn themselves thin than let the night enter through the cut. For one breath, the crack narrowed. The court exhaled. Then the black mist changed direction. It flowed away from the sealed crescent and slid along the wall toward the inspection platform. Maelis's eyes sharpened. "No," she whispered. Corvan followed her gaze. "What?" The mist was not searching randomly. It was following a faint silver dust trail across the frost, almost invisible beneath the court's boots. The trail led to Nivelle's architect table, to the sealed jars of pale mortar prepared for tomorrow's display. Nivelle stepped in front of them. "Those are reinforcement compounds." Maelis pushed away from the wall, shaking with pain. The moonseals clung tighter, still glowing. "Open one." Nivelle's voice turned hard. "They are sealed under architect authority." Corvan looked at the jars, then at Maelis. This time he did not ask Nivelle. "Open it." A guard broke the wax. Inside the jar lay smooth white mortar, beautiful as ground pearl. It should have smelled of lime, ash, and stone bond. Instead, Maelis smelled rain on black stone, winter moss. Old Night held at a distance. Her stomach twisted. The moonseals began to shriek. Not with voices, with light. Silver streaks flashed across every living trail on Maelis's body, and the white mortar in the jar pulsed in answer. The old trails had not vanished. They had been scraped away, dried, and ground into display seal. The jar cracked down the side. On the frost beneath it, silver dust arranged itself into a line, old trail ground into architect mortar. The cracked jar kept shining. That was the worst part. The architect mortar inside it looked beautiful in the moonlight, smooth as pearl cream, bright enough to make the old black stones seem noble and clean. It was exactly the kind of surface foreign envoys admired, because they did not have to sleep beneath it. It covered ugliness. It reflected banners. It made danger look finished. The Moonseal creatures shrieked with light across Maelis Thorn's body. Not for her, never for her. They were not worshipping a hidden queen, not kneeling to chosen blood, not naming a mate bond the court could turn into another chain. They were recognizing their own dead trail, scraped from the wall, dried, ground, and mixed into a paste meant to decorate the wound. Maelis stared at the jar until the glow blurred. "You made mortar from living seal." Nivelle Thorn's face went cold. "I refined unstable organic residue into architectural compound." "Residue," Maelis repeated. The word tasted like ash. Border workers became labor. Hunger became shortage. Dead trail became residue. Men and women with clean titles could murder a thing more easily once they renamed it. Alpha King Corvan Blackmere stood beside the broken jar, the black mist curling along the frost behind him. His sword was still in his hand. Useless, but not lowered. He looked at the pearl-white compound, then at the bare seam, then at the moonseals clinging to Maelis's sleeves. "What happens when dead trail is put on the wall?" he asked. Maelis did not answer him quickly. She had answered kings too quickly all her life. Quick answers became tools in other people's mouths. At last she said, "It shines." Nivelle seized on it. "Exactly. It preserves the moonlit integrity of the surface." Maelis looked at her. "And it does not feed." The court quieted. The black mist near the crack stretched toward the opened jar. Everyone saw it this time. The mist did not recoil from the mortar. It tasted the white paste and slid closer, thin and hungry, as if following a scent from something killed but not buried properly. Maelis continued, "Living trail grows because moonseals feed along pressure. Dead trail remembers where it was torn. The outer dark follows memory." Nivelle laughed softly. "Poetry in place of measurement. Then measure that." Maelis pointed. The mist reached the jar. The pearl mortar turned gray, then black. Then it sank inward, collapsing into itself like wet ash. The silver dust inside it flashed once and went dark. Not sealed. Consumed. A tremor passed through the east moon wall. The lower stones groaned. Corvan turned his head. Maelis did too. Far below the upper crescent, beneath the inspection platform where nobles had been standing, thin silver-white lines began to shine through the dark stone. At first, they looked like moonlight catching frost. Then Maelis saw the pattern and felt her blood drain cold. Too smooth. So even. Too pretty. No, she whispered. Nivelle moved in front of the platform steps. The lower reinforcement was completed under my authority. Corvan's voice lowered. Reinforcement? For envoy inspection, Nivelle said. The lower seams were visually inconsistent. I ordered surface correction so the east moon wall would present a unified face. Maelis walked toward the platform. The moonseals tightened around her, stretching their trails as if afraid she might touch the coated stones. Every step hurt. Her back still burned from holding the breach. Her hands throbbed beneath the creature's cold light. But the wall was speaking now through every polished lie on its surface. She stopped before the lower seam. It gleamed beautifully. That beauty made her sick. A real moonseal trail was uneven, braided, nervous. It thickened where darkness pressed and thinned where stone held strong. It looked alive because it was alive. This was a painted scar. She held one hand near it. The Moonseal Creatures recoiled up her sleeve. Corvan saw. They fear it. They know it, she said. Nivelle stepped closer. Or, she has taught them to perform. Maelis turned to her. You keep saying I control them because admitting they remember would condemn you. Nivelle's eyes sharpened. Careful, wall scraper. No. The word came out quiet. But the silver trails around Maelis brightened. I have been careful for years. I moved them gently, fed them moon moss in winter, kept their trails wet when noble sons carved initials into the lower stones, scraped them only from dead seam to living seam. I was careful while you called protection filth. Corvan's gaze shifted to her hands again. This time, he did not reach. He had learned that much. Not enough, but something. The black mist at the upper crack thickened. A second thread of darkness appeared behind the lower platform, sliding through a hairline split beneath the pearl coating. One of the envoy's banners trembled. Then its embroidered wolf head blackened at the mouth. The court recoiled from the viewing stand. Nivelle lifted her voice. Majesty, this proves the wall requires my full reconstruction. The old method has failed. Maelis looked at the lower seam. The old method was removed. By order. By ambition. Nivelle's face hardened. Corvan stepped toward the coated wall. Can this be stripped? Maelis almost laughed. Now. He wanted scraping. Not for shame. For survival. The dead paste can be removed, she said. But the living trail beneath it is already gone. His expression did not change, but the scar at his jaw tightened. Then what remains? Stone. The word frightened the court more than any scream. The lower seam cracked. A thin black line opened through the beautiful pearl coating, and the outer dark pressed one pale claw of shadow through. The Moonseal Creatures on Maelis's body flared until every scraped cut on her hands shone silver. On the inspection platform, Nivelle's clean diagram slid from the table and scattered across the frost. One page landed at Corvan's feet. The moonlight struck its ink, and a hidden workmark bled upward through the plan. Lower seams coded for envoy display before structural testing. The lower platform emptied before anyone gave permission. Nobles who had come to admire a clean border wall stumbled backward through frost, silks dragging over black stone, perfume turning sour under fear. The pale claw of shadow pressed through the lower seam and felt the air like a blind thing. It did not have a full body yet. That made it worse. A body could be struck. This was intention without flesh, hunger without a throat, Night, remembering every place the wall had been made only stone. Maelis Thorn moved first, not toward safety, toward the seam. The Moonseal Creatures tightened over her arms until their silver trails bit cold into her skin. They were weak, too weak. She felt it in their trembling bodies, in the way their light flickered each time the outer dark knocked against the coated lower seam. A healthy colony would have swarmed the pressure point, fed, thickened, sealed. These creatures clung to her like sparks in rain. Alpha King Corvan Blackmere caught her path with one step. "Do not stand between both cracks." Maelis looked at him. "Then move the cord away from the lower seam." "I said do not." And I heard a king still mistaking warning for disobedience. His face hardened. Good. Hardness was more useful than pity. The shadow claws scraped wider through the beautiful pearl coating. One guard lunged with a spear. The weapon passed through darkness and struck stone. The guard cried out as black frost raced up the spear shaft and burned his palm. He dropped it, shaking. "Steel will not hold it," Maelis said. Corvan turned toward his captains. "Clear the platform. No one crosses the lower frost line." The order moved like thunder. Guards shoved nobles away from the viewing stand. Envoy banners were ripped down before the black mouth spreading across the embroidered wolves could crawl into the fabric. Maelis Thorn stood near her scattered diagrams, very still, eyes moving faster than her face allowed. Maelis saw calculation there, not fear. Calculation. "What do the creatures need?" Corvan asked. Maelis kept her gaze on the lower seam. "Food." A courtier made a strangled sound. "Food? Moon moss?" she said. "Wet, fresh, from shaded stone. They cannot lay living mortar if they are starving." Corvan looked toward the wall shed at the base of the eastern tower. "Where is it stored?" Maelis's mouth went dry. The wall shed. Herschel. The little black room where she had kept moon moss in damp clay trays, where she slept with frost in her hair so the creatures would not dry during hard winter, where nobles left spoiled scraps and jokes carved into the door. She had not been allowed inside since Nivelle's inspection crews took control 3 mornings ago. "The shed," she said. Nivelle stepped in smoothly. The wall stores were reorganized for safety. Maelis turned. Reorganized? Unregulated moss trays attract rot. They keep the colony alive. They kept the wall unsightly. The Moonseal Creatures flared across Maelis's wrists, and for one instant, every scraped wound on her hands glowed through the silver trail. Corvan saw. His eyes went to Nivelle. "Open the shed." Nivelle folded her hands. "Majesty, the shed's doors are under architect quarantine until structural review is complete." The lower seam cracked again. Black air poured through in a thin breath. Maelis did not wait. She walked toward the shed. A guard moved to stop her out of habit, then looked at the moonlight crawling over her body and stepped aside. Corvan followed. Nivelle followed because she had no choice. The court watched from a distance while the east moon wall groaned behind them. The shed door was locked with a new iron clasp. Not Maelis. Hers had been old bronze, because bronze did not burn moonseal bodies when handled after feeding. Corvan looked at the clasp. "Key." Nivelle's voice was calm. "I have it. Use it." She hesitated one breath too long. Maelis saw the hesitation and knew before the door opened. The lock turned. The smell came out first. Dry stone. Old dust. Death without blood. Inside the wall shed, every clay tray had been stacked empty along the back wall. The damp cloths were gone. The water jars had been overturned and left dry. The moss shelves, once thick with pale green moon moss gathered from shaded cracks, were stripped bare. In the corner, a sealed crate of withered moss sat under architect wax, gray and brittle as dead hair. Maelis stepped into the shed as if walking into a room where someone she loved had been laid out and covered. The Moonseal Creatures on her body dimmed. One by one, their lights sank low. Corvan stood in the doorway. Too large for the little room. his black mantle brushing the threshold she had slept beside for half her life. He looked at the empty trays, then at the narrow sleeping pallet under the shelves, then at the scratches cut into the inside of the door, where Maelis had marked cold nights and feeding cycles. His voice was low. "You lived here." She did not look at him. "I worked here." "That is not what I asked." "I know." The answer closed the room between them. Nivelle appeared behind him. Moon moss was preserved for controlled application after reconstruction. The creatures were not being starved. They were being transitioned. Maelis picked up a handful of gray moss from the sealed crate. It crumbled between her fingers. "Transitioned into what?" she asked. "Ash?" Nivelle's eyes cooled. "A boarder must answer design, not habit." Maelis turned slowly. "A boarder must answer what is trying to enter." From outside came a deeper sound. Not a knock, a scrape. The outer dark had found the lower seam wide enough to drag itself along. The withered moss in Maelis's hand flashed silver once, then fell into dust. Across the crate, the architect wax began to melt, revealing the stamped order beneath it. Moon moss stores withheld under architect authority. The east moon wall shook so violently that frost rained from the rafters. Then, beyond the shed door, the lower seam opened its second eye. The lower seam opened like an eye waking under the wall. Not wide. Not yet. Only a black oval between stones, rimmed with pearl mortar and dying silver dust. But something looked through it. Maelis Thorn felt that gaze crawl across the frost, across the emptied inspection platform, across the nobles huddled behind guards, and finally settle on the Moonseal creatures dimming against her skin. The creatures tightened around her wrists. They knew hunger, when hunger found them. Alpha King Corvan Blackmere stepped out of the wall shed with a withered moon moss order crushed in one hand. His face was carved still, but his wolf pressed close beneath the surface now. Maelis could feel it in the air, a low royal heat pushing against the outer dark, powerful but strained, like a wounded beast trying not to limp before its pack. The second eye blinked. A strip of black mist slid through. It touched the frost and became a long, thin shape like a finger without bone. One noblewoman screamed. The shape snapped toward the sound. Maelis moved before thought. She crossed the frost with the moonseals clinging to her body and slammed both hands against the lower seam. Silver trail burst from her palms. The black finger recoiled. Pain shot through her wrists so sharply, her knees nearly failed. The Moonseal creatures pulsed along her arms, feeding what little strength they had through her scraped skin. Their trails spread across the lower seam in jagged lines, not enough to close the opening, only enough to make the dark hesitate. Corvan was beside her in the next breath. Too close. Too late. "Maelis." She did not look at him. "Do not say my name as if it repairs anything." His jaw tightened, but he did not step back. "Tell me how to hold it." "You cannot hold it with command." "Then with what?" "Admission." That made him still. "Good. Let the word enter where steel could not." Behind them, Nivelle Thorn raised her voice. "Majesty, this is exactly why old wall-keeping must be replaced. The Scraper's method has failed publicly. The Moonseal colony is unstable. The East Moon Wall requires emergency reconstruction under single architectural authority." Maelis looked over her shoulder. Nivelle stood near the inspection table, pale but controlled, one gloved hand resting on a black leather case that had not been opened before. The case bore no dust, no frost. It had been brought here ready. Maelis saw it. Corvan saw it a moment later. "What is in that case?" he asked. Nivelle's mouth softened. "The answer, Majesty." The lower seam knocked from inside Maelis's palms. She bit down hard enough to taste blood. The silver trails flickered. Corvan turned toward his guards. "Open it." Nivelle's eyes sharpened. "Majesty, the breach is active." "Open it." A guard seized the black case from the inspection table. Nivelle's hand followed it. but she stopped before touching the guard's wrist. That restraint was almost more revealing than panic. The case opened. Inside lay rolled parchment, sealed in dark blue wax, silver measuring pins, a chain of small moon iron clamps, and an architect's command rod carved with the east moon wall's outline. Everything was arranged with ceremonial precision. Not emergency tools. Presentation tools. Corvan took the parchment. Nivelle spoke quickly. Prepared in anticipation of possible envoy concerns. Any responsible architect brings contingency instruments to a royal inspection. Maelis pressed harder against the seam. Contingency instruments with moon iron clamps? Nivelle turned cold eyes on her. You would not understand their function. I understand what iron does to living seal. The Moonseal Creatures flared weakly in agreement. Corvan broke the blue wax. His eyes moved over the parchment. The outer dark pressed again, and Maelis's arms shook. The black eye beneath her hands widened around the silver trail. She felt it testing her, not like an animal testing prey, but like water testing rotten wood. What does it say? She asked. Corvan did not answer. That silence had become familiar. The kind, powerful men used when the truth in their hands became ugly. Nivelle stepped forward. Majesty, emergency reconstruction charters are standard in border governance. Maelis laughed through the pain. Before the emergency? Nivelle's face hardened. Corvan read aloud at last, voice low. Upon visible failure of the East Moon Wall during royal or foreign inspection, emergency authority transfers to the border architect until structural confidence is restored. The court shifted. Now fear had two faces. The dark in the wall, and the woman prepared to profit from it. Corvan continued, slower. All wall-keepers, old-growth tenders, Moonseal handlers, and border maintenance servants to be dismissed from direct authority, living material to be harvested, refined, and reapplied under architectural command. Maelis closed her eyes. Living material. That was what the creatures were to Nivelle. Not guardians. Not mortar. Materiel. The Moonseal Creatures on Maelis's wrists dimmed almost to gray. Corvan's voice dropped into something more dangerous. Signed? Nivelle answered before he finished. Prepared, not enacted. Signed? The silence stretched. The parchment crackled in his hand. Corvan looked at the bottom seal. Nivelle Thorn. The court's fear sharpened into understanding. Nivelle lifted her chin. Yes, drafted under my office. Not unlawful. The wall's condition required foresight. Maelis opened her eyes and looked at her over one shaking shoulder. You foresaw a wound you made. Nivelle's expression did not change. I foresaw weakness, your kind, protected out of habit. The lower seam struck outward. Maelis cried out before she could swallow the sound. Corvan moved instantly, one hand catching her shoulder to keep her from falling. The moonseals hissed with light. Maelis jerked away from his touch. Even his pain bent her. Do not touch the seal. His hand fell. For one breath, his face showed something raw. Not apology. Not yet. Maybe the first true knowledge that even his help could harm when it came too late and unasked. Nivelle seized the moment. Majesty, she cannot hold both breaches. The wall needs my clamps. Maelis looked at the moon iron chain in the case. Those clamps will pin dead trail over living seams. It will look sealed. And hold. For the envoys? Maelis said. Not for the night. The black eye opened wider. From within, it came a sound like claws dragging through wet stone. Corvan looked from the breach to the charter, then to the moonseals fading on Maelis's arms. What happens if the clamps are used? Maelis's voice shook, but the words stayed clear. The wall will stop speaking before it dies. The parchment in Corvan's hand darkened, not burned, stained. Silver light from the creatures reached the ink and pulled hidden lines from beneath the charter's clean language. One phrase rose through the page in cold moonscript. Emergency authority activated by visible border failure. Another line followed. Border failure prepared before inspection. The charter did not burn. It bled moonlight. Silver script crawled across Maelis Thorn's clean emergency decree, pulling old words from beneath new ones like bones rising through shallow soil. Border failure prepared before inspection. The court read it. Not all at once. Fear made people slow. Nobles who had laughed at Maelis Thorn now stared at the parchment in Alpha King Corvan Blackmere's hand and began to understand that the East Moon Wall had not failed from age, superstition, or a low woman's filthy work. It had been prepared to fail. The lower seam groaned. Maelis still knelt before it, both hands pressed against black stone, while the Moonseal Creatures clung to her arms and bled silver trail through the cracks in her skin. Their light was thinner now. Too thin. The upper breach breathed above her shoulder. The lower eye widened beneath her palms. The outer dark pressed from two places at once, and the living shield around her body shook like a candle in storm wind. Corvan looked from the charter to Neville. You drafted authority to replace the wall. Keepers before the wall failed. Neville's face sharpened. I drafted authority because the wall keepers had already failed. Maelis laughed, and the sound broke at the edge. You starved what kept it alive, ground its dead trail into paste, coated the seams, then brought a charter to rule the corpse. Neville turned on her. And you would rather let the border rot under crawling things than allow a civilized reconstruction. The Moonseal Creatures flashed. Not bright. Angry. The lower seam knocked from inside Maelis's hands. This time she could not hide the pain. Her shoulders buckled, and frost spread up her sleeves beneath the silver trails. Corvan moved toward her, then stopped before touching. The hesitation cost him. The court saw that he wanted to help, and did not know how to do so without becoming one more hand that took permission from her too late. What do you need? He asked. Maelis did not look at him. Truth. We do not have time for court ceremony. Then speak plainly. The words cut. Corvan's jaw tightened. What truth? She lifted her head slowly. Her face was pale in the moonlight. Her dark hair stuck to her cheek with sweat and frost. The creatures on her shoulders pulsed like dying stars. You ordered them to scrape the wall because you wanted it clean for envoys, she said. You let them call living mortar filth. You let them call me scraper because wallkeeper sounded too close to authority. You trusted her report because it was neat, and I was not. Silence spread hard across the frost. Neville whispered, Majesty, this is manipulation. No, Maelis said. This is the price of asking the creatures to return to a wall that was ashamed of them. The lower eye opened wider. A shape moved behind it. Not fully formed. A shoulder without flesh. A jaw made of dark pressure. Teeth suggested by the absence of light. Several guards stepped back despite their training. Corvan's wolf rose in him. Everyone felt it. A low royal growl passed through the wall yard, vibrating in bone and banner pole. For a moment the outer dark hesitated. Then it pressed again, harder, and Corvan's face tightened with hidden pain. His wolf was not strong enough to hold the seam. Maelis saw it. She hated that seeing it hurt. Neville saw it too, and lifted her voice. The Alpha King's strength is being drained by the unstable colony. Use the clamps. Pin the seam. Let me complete emergency reconstruction. Maelis looked at the moon iron clamps in the case. Use those, and the wall will go silent. It will stand. It will stand, pretty. The word landed with venom. Corvan looked down at the old silver script spreading over the charter. Another line was forming beneath Neville's decree, not from ink, but from trail memory rising out of the frost beneath Maelis's knees. The Moonseals had begun writing on the ground. Not a prophecy. Not a chosen mark. A work law. Old. Practical. Buried under generations of noble convenience. Living seal failure answers first to wallkeeper witness. The court recoiled as if the frost had accused them personally. Neville's face lost color. That law is pre-crown. Maelis looked at her. So is the wall? The creatures rode again. Silver trails spreading from Maelis's palms, across the frost, around the discarded bone scraper, and toward the old black stones. No noble command may cut living mortar during active night pressure. Corvan read it. His expression changed, not into softness, not into regret the court could applaud, but into the harder shape of a man discovering that his authority had been standing on top of a rule older than his throne. "What does Wallkeeper Witness require?" he asked. Nivelle snapped. "Majesty, do not legitimize." Corvan turned on her. "Be silent." The order cracked across the yard. Nivelle went still. Maelis did not smile. Corvan silencing Nivelle did not undo him listening to her earlier. "A witness naming," Maelis said. "The pack must name what was done. Not clean, not improve, not refine. Scrape, starve, grind, coat, cut." A nobleman protested weakly. "Before foreign envoys?" Maelis's eyes moved to him. "The outer dark is not waiting for your dignity." The lower eye opened another inch. A black claw reached through and touched Maelis's silver trail. The creature screamed light. Maelis gasped and nearly fell forward. Corvan stepped in front of the court. "Say it." No one moved. He looked at the nobles, the guards, the architects, the courtiers who had laughed with scented cloths at their noses. "Say what was done." Still silence. Then Tessa-like, "No, not Tessa in this story. Need local witness. We need maybe old wall guard. Let's create captain. But one main reveal. Use a young wall guard." A young wall guard dropped to one knee. "We scraped the living mortar." Another voice followed, shaking. "We called protection filth." A third, from a courtwoman who had mocked the smell. "We ordered beauty before survival." The silver trails brightened. Not enough. Maelis looked at Corvan. He understood what remained. His voice did not rise. "That made it worse. I ordered the wall cleaned for display," he said. "I trusted a clean report over the woman who kept the border alive." The Moonseal Creatures stilled. Maelis closed her eyes once. Not forgiveness. Recognition. The old law beneath her hands flared. Wallkeeper Witness accepted. Then another line formed, colder and sharper. Architect command suspended during living seal failure. Nivelle stepped back. For the first time, she looked frightened. The moonseals loosened from Maelis's wrists. Slowly, carefully. A few of them stretched toward the cracked lower seam. They did not trust the wall yet. They did not return because the king spoke. They followed the truth named aloud, laying thin silver threads from Maelis's hands to the wounded stone. The black claw recoiled. The lower eye narrowed. A breath of relief moved through the court. Too soon. From the upper breach, a deeper knock sounded. Then, another. Then 100. Maelis lifted her head. Beyond the east moon wall, the outer dark had heard the law awaken, and it began knocking along every seam Nivelle had made beautiful. The east moon wall began to answer from too many places at once. Not with one crack now, with a chorus. Knocks traveled beneath the black stone like bones tapping from inside a grave. Upper seam, lower seam, eastern watch joint, old drainage arch, banner root. Every place Nivelle Thorn had made beautiful for the envoys began to pulse with hidden dark. The pearl coating shone under moonlight, flawless and pale, and beneath it the wall was opening. The court broke. Not fully. Royal courts did not collapse like villages. They fractured in controlled ways. Nobles retreating behind guards, guards looking to captains, captains looking to Corvan Blackmere, and every frightened eye avoiding the wallkeeper they had called filthy less than an hour before. Maelis Thorn stood in the frost with silver creatures trembling over her body and knew the truth before the wall finished speaking. They could not seal every seam through her. A body could hold one wound, not a border. "Move back from the wall line," she said. No one moved. Her voice sharpened. "Move, or the dark will use you as soft stone." Corvan turned at once. "Clear the wall line." This time, the command worked because it carried her warning inside it. Guards forced the court backward. The viewing platform emptied. Foreign banners were dragged away and thrown into the frost. The envoys who had come to judge the wall's appearance now watched survival strip dignity from everyone who had worshipped display. Nivelle did not retreat. She stood beside the open black case, her gloved hands wrapped around the moon iron clamps. Silver measuring pins glinted between her fingers. Her face had gone pale, but not broken. "Majesty," she said, "there is still time to stabilize the wall." The old witness law granted her temporary standing. It did not grant her command over reconstruction. Maelis looked at the clamps. "Put those on the seams, and you will pin dead trail over living pressure." Nivelle's mouth tightened. "And if we do nothing, the border falls." "We are not doing nothing. You are standing there covered in frightened creatures while the wall dies." Maelis took one step toward her. The moonseals flared. "They are frightened because you starved them." Nivelle's composure cracked just enough for anger to show. "Because your kind kept the border dependent on crawling weakness." "Living weakness," Maelis said, "which is stronger than beautiful death." Corvan stepped between them, but not as shield. This time he did not block Maelis from the architect. He stood beside her line of sight, facing Nivelle with the charter still in his hand. "Set the clamps down," he said. Nivelle stared at him. "If I do, you lose the wall. If you use them without wall-keeper witness, you lose your hands first." The court heard the dragon-cold promise in an Alpha King's voice. Nivelle slowly lowered the clamps. Too slowly. A knock burst from the banner root seam behind her. The ground split. A black tendril shot out, thin as whipcord, and wrapped around the nearest moon iron clamp. Instead of recoiling, the dark clung to it. Maelis's stomach dropped. "Of course," she whispered. Corvan looked at her. "What?" "The dark recognizes the clamps." Nivelle moved fast, trying to kick the clamp away, but the Moonseal Creatures on Maelis's arms suddenly blazed. Their silver trails leapt to the frost, not sealing now, but tracing. A line ran from the clamp case to the banner root seam, another to the lower platform, another to the upper crescent, another to the old drainage arch. The trails formed a map across the frost, each glowing strand connecting Nivelle's instruments to a place where the wall had been weakened. It was not accusation from prophecy. It was contact memory. Iron touched trail. Trail remembered iron. Darkness followed what iron had prepared. Corvan's eyes moved over the map. "These are the breach points." Maelis nodded. "Not random. Chosen." Nivelle's voice cut through the cold. "All structural repairs target weak points." Maelis looked at her. "Repairs happen after weakness is found. These points were prepared before tonight." The silver map tightened. At the center of it lay Nivelle's architect rod. The rod had seemed ceremonial when the case opened. Black wood, moon, iron tip, clean measurement marks. Now the silver trails crawled up its length and revealed older residue caught along the carved grooves. Scraped trail, dried moon moss, black seam dust. The rod had not merely measured the wounds. It had made them. Corvan lifted the rod without touching the iron tip. This was used on the wall. Nivelle's face became still. "Architect rods mark stone," Maelis said. "Not with Moonseal blood." The word silenced even the nobles. Blood was not the right term, not exactly. Moonseals did not bleed red. But when their living trail was cut too deeply, silver fluid seeped from their bodies and hardened into dust. Maelis had washed that dust from stones before. She had wept over it as a girl before learning that weeping did not warm dying creatures. The rod flared under the trails. A hidden work record appeared along its shaft, written in cold silver. Weak points opened for emergency demonstration. Nivelle stepped back. Corvan read it aloud once, each word landing harder than the knocks in the wall. Weak points opened for emergency demonstration. Nivelle lifted her chin. Demonstration of necessity. The wall was already failing. Maelis's voice was almost soft. So you helped it fail, where people could see. For the crown, Nivelle snapped. For funding. For authority. For a real reconstruction instead of your shed, your moss, your crawling little relics. Kings do not move for invisible work. Courts do not fund maintenance. Envoys do not respect damp bowls and women with split hands. There it was. Not a full confession. Not in the shape law loved. Something worse. A truth spoken from impatience. Corvan's face hardened into winter. You endangered the border to force my hand. I exposed its weakness. You made it visible by cutting it open. The outer dark struck every marked seam at once. The wall screamed. Stone dust rained down like black snow. Maelis staggered as the Moonseals recoiled, their trails snapping back toward her. For one breath, all the visible cracks widened, and beyond them the dark pressed faces into the openings. No eyes, no mouths, only hunger shaped by absence. Corvan's wolf surged. A howl tore from him, deep and royal, shaking the frost from every banner pole. The dark hesitated, but only for a heartbeat. His wolf was powerful. It was not mortar. It could challenge enemies with flesh. It could not seal a wall taught to die from within. Maelis turned to the scattered servants near the wall shed. Old scrape crews, moss carriers, bowl washers, the invisible people the court had never named. All wall keepers to me, she said. They froze. She shouted. Now! They came, slowly at first, then running. An old man with scarred palms, 2 young girls who carried damp cloth, a broad-shouldered woman with a moon moss knife, 3 boys who had been mocked for smelling of stone. They gathered behind Maelis, terrified and shaking, but they came because the wall had been their life, long before it became the court's spectacle. Maelis faced Corvan. Say it before them. He understood. This was not about forgiveness. This was foundation. His voice carried across the yard. Wallkeepers hold first authority over living seal. No architect, noble, envoy, or king may cut, starve, grind, coat, or command Moonseal creatures without wallkeeper witness during night pressure. Nivelle hissed. You cannot rewrite border law in panic. Maelis looked toward the cracks. This is not panic. This is the border finally being heard. The Moonseal creatures loosened from her body. This time, they did not flee to her alone. They stretched toward every wallkeeper who had kept them alive. Silver trails linked scraped hands to scraped hands, old palms to young fingers, moss knives to damp cloth, Maelis to the wounded wall. The creatures did not choose a queen. They recognized their keepers. Across the frost, the architect rod split in Corvan's hand. Silver script burned from its broken core and wrote one final line beneath the exposed map of sabotage. Border crisis created to claim emergency authority. The wall did not heal because a king spoke. It only listened. That was more than the East Moon wall had done all night. The black seams still knocked. The outer dark still pressed faces made of hunger against every beautiful wound Nivelle Thorn had opened. The moon iron clamps lay scattered in the frost. The architect rod had split in Alpha King Corvan Blackmere's hand, its broken core still burning with the line no court could unsee. Border crisis created to claim emergency authority. Nivelle's face had become pale stone. The wallkeepers stood around Maelis Thorn in a trembling half-circle, old hands, young hands, split hands, moss-stained hands. The Moonseal creatures moved among them now, not rushing, not worshipping, not choosing blood. They crawled toward the people who had fed them, carried them, wetted their trails, and kept them from dying when the court called their work filth. Silver threads stretched from keeper to keeper, then from the keepers to the wall. Maelis lifted both scraped hands. "Do not force them onto the dead paste. Start where the stone still remembers food." The old wall-keeper beside her nodded. "Living seam first." A young girl with damp cloth whispered. "Lower breath second. Only if it recoils from moss," Maelis said. "Do not touch the claw." The girl swallowed and nodded. Corvan watched her give orders with a stillness more dangerous than praise. This was not battlefield command. No banners. No horns. No polished captains moving in ranks. This was uglier, slower, older. Damp cloth pressed to black stone. Moon moss crushed between wounded fingers. Pale creatures carried gently into cracks that had already tried to kill them. Silver Trail laid one patient strand at a time. The court did not understand how to admire it. Good. Admiration had never kept the wall alive. Maelis pressed moon moss into the upper crescent. The creatures nearest her stretched forward, testing the stone. One recoiled from the iron burn. Another trembled. A third laid a thread as thin as hair across the wound. The outer dark struck. Maelis's knees buckled. Corvan moved before thought, then stopped. He had learned. Not enough to mend everything. Enough not to ruin this moment. With a hand she had not invited. "Hold the line behind her," he ordered his guards. "No one touches a keeper unless they ask." The guards formed a ring, blades outward, useless against the dark, but useful against panic. Nobles who tried to flee through the working line were forced back. The envoys stood silent under torn banners, finally seeing the border they had come to judge. Nivelle laughed once. It was thin and bitter. "You think this will hold? A handful of servants and crawling relics?" Maelis did not turn. "It held before you wanted credit for saving it." Corvan looked at his captains. "Take her." Nivelle stepped back. "Majesty, I am the only architect trained to reconstruct the East Moon Wall." "No," Maelis said, still working. "You are trained to make it obey you." The Moonseal Creatures flared. The silver map of sabotage across the frost brightened, every prepared weak point glowing around Nivelle's boots. Guards seized her arms. She fought then, not wildly, proudly. "You will crawl back to old methods and call it wisdom. The next envoy will see rot. The next winter will eat the seam. They will blame you when the wall looks weak." Maelis finally looked at her. The wall was never weak, because it looked alive. Nivelle had no answer for that. The guards dragged her away from the working line. The outer dark surged one last time, as if angered by the loss of the hands that had invited it. Black pressure slammed through the lower eye. A claw of absence tore across the frost toward the keepers. Corvan stepped before it, his wolf bursting through his shadow in a shape of black fur and silver eyes. The royal wolf struck the dark head-on. It did not seal the wound, but it bought one breath. One breath was enough. "Now," Maelis said. Every wall-keeper laid moon moss at once. Every Moonseal creature fed. Silver erupted across the East Moon Wall. Not smooth. Not pretty. Not the quartz false pearl shine. It was jagged, uneven, braided, living. It crawled over cracks and iron wounds, over old scars and fresh cuts, thickening where the dark screamed loudest. The outer dark recoiled from seam after seam, knocked once more, then lost the places Nivelle had opened for it. The black eyes closed. The East Moon Wall held, not because it had been made clean, because it had been allowed to live. No one cheered. Survival deserved silence first. Maelis lowered her hands. Blood and silver trail crossed her palms. The creatures on her wrists dimmed with exhaustion, but they did not flee. They settled against her skin like cold leaves after rain. Corvan approached slowly. He looked at her hands. This time he did not reach. "What must be recorded?" he asked. Maelis's eyes stayed on the wall. "That the work was protection." He turned to the court. "Say it." The nobles hesitated. Corvan's voice hardened. "Say what kept you alive." One by one they spoke. The wall keepers protected the border. The Moonseal trails were living seal. We called protection filth. We ordered display before survival. The words did not heal her hands, but the creatures heard them. Silver light pulsed along the wall. Maelis faced Corvan. "And the law." He nodded once. "Name it." She looked at the wallkeepers first, not him. "No noble, architect, envoy, or king may command living seal unless they have kept one night outside the protected seam and survived to understand what the wall holds back. Wallkeepers answer to no hand that cannot endure the dark. It orders them to manage. No Moonseal creature may be cut, starved, ground, coated, or moved for display. Living mortar answers first, to keep her witness. Corvan repeated every word before the court. Not improved, not softened, recorded. The silver trails burned the law into the black stone beneath the east moon wall. Only then did Corvan look back at Maelis. "I let them shame the hands that kept my border alive." She drew her hands closer to herself. "Yes, I trusted a clean report over your warning. Yes, I will answer for it. To the keepers first," she said. He bowed his head. "To the keepers first." The distance between them remained, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like a road he would have to walk without command. By dawn, the envoys had left their viewing stand and stood below the wall with ash on their boots. The nobles stayed silent, while Maelis and the wallkeepers carried fresh moon moss to the living seams. Corvan removed his black wolf mantle and laid it over the broken shed door, not as charity, but as witness that the place he had ignored would be rebuilt before the inspection hall, before the banners, before any coronation feast. Maelis did not thank him. He did not ask her to. When the first pale sunrise touched the east moon wall, the Moonseal creatures glowed softly across its scars. The wall was not beautiful in the court's way. It was uneven, silver-threaded, breathing, alive. Maelis stood beneath it with scraped hands and a steady heart. Behind her, Alpha King Corvan Blackmere watched the border he had almost made pretty enough to die. And this time, when the wall whispered, the whole kingdom listened.